off by doing a quick round of intros, and then we'll jump into some questions. So my name is Nikki O'Kook. I work with CalSTART, which is a nonprofit in the clean transportation sector. We do work nationwide and globally, including the Global Drive to Zero, but we're probably best well known for administering some of the zero emission incentive programs in California. So I work a lot on, our off-road equipment and our on-road truck and bus programs, right? How to get the incentives out there and buy down the cost of this new zero emission technology for businesses so they can deploy cleaner equipment in our neighborhoods. And with that, I'll turn it over to Natalia.
Hi, everybody. My name is Natalia Swalnick. I am the Director of Government Affairs at Roush Clean Tech. We make alternative fuel trucks and buses. I'm based in San Diego, California. And I like to say I've been in the electric vehicle industry since before we really had one. So I started my work actually as a Clean Cities coordinator in the Denver metro area. I ran that coalition for about 6 years. And that's really where I got my start in electric vehicles, handling different EV roadmaps and things like that. I also moved into private sector consulting and did that work as well. And, it's really exciting just to see how the field has advanced both, in so many fronts, in terms of technology, in terms of the uptake that we've seen, just here in the last year. And then also this equity lens that we're really starting to use to examine how we are doing the work, because I can tell you that some of those early roadmaps didn't really consider equity much at all. And so it's great to see that. And then my most recent stint before I came on board at Roush about a year ago, I was with the Electrification Coalition as their Senior Director of Programs. So that's really where I started getting my feet wet in this topic. And I'm really excited to bring some of those learnings and what we're doing on the OEM side to all of you guys today. So thank you so much for having me.
Great. Thank you. Mark?
Sure, thanks. My name is Mark Daniels. I work for the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals, which is based out of Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. So we work with tribes all over the country, working on a variety of different environmentally oriented programs, and do a lot of trainings and things like that to try to help boost capacity at tribal environmental programs as well, so that folks can take care of their lands and waters and air and everything. Specifically for the last 3 years, I have been coordinating the Volkswagen Settlement Technical Assistance Program here at ITEP, the abbreviation for our institute. So for that, you may recall back in 2015, Volkswagen got busted for cheating on their diesel emissions tests. And as part of the huge settlement they had to do with the federal government, about $3 billion, a little under $3 billion was set aside for mitigation actions. So the idea was that they would fund projects where other entities would take old diesel trucks and buses and things like that off the road, get them out of service, and replace them with new vehicles that are either new diesel and therefore just cleaner by virtue of being new, or if possible, electric or hybrids and things like that as well. Some of that money, a portion of that money, about 55 million, was set aside for the tribes of the nation. And so we were basically hired, my organization was hired to provide technical assistance to help folks jump through all the hoops they have to jump through to get that money, basically. So we've had 4 funding cycles now, 4 annual funding cycles of this. We're wrapping up our 4th funding cycle right now. There's probably not going to be another funding cycle. There's a slim chance there might be enough money left for another, but it's unlikely. So we're probably done now. So I can talk a little bit retrospectively about how the program has gone and what we've been able to help folks do. But then I also have some other resources I can steer at least tribal folks towards as well for ways to replace vehicles and possibly invest in electrics or hybrids or EV charging stations and things like that. So.
Great, thank you. Arvind?
Yeah, first off, I'd like to thank you all. Pleasure to share the stage. Thank you, Forth, for having us, and welcome everybody. And thank you for signing on to this. My name is Arvind Kailas, and I am the Advanced Technology Policy Director for Volvo Group North America. And in my day job, I help set the legislative priorities for Volvo Group North America across its entire product portfolio, and manage government relations when it comes to advanced technologies. That includes electromobility. A little bit about the Volvo Group. We are a company that manufactures and sells transport and infrastructure solutions, specifically medium duty, heavy duty trucks, construction equipment, transit buses, coach buses, and industrial grade and marine grade engines. In North America, we are the makers of Volvo trucks, Mack trucks, Nova bus, Prevost coach bus, and then Volvo construction equipment and Volvo Penta. So again, pleasure to be here, and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So that reminds me to probably set a little bit of context about the conversation we're having. A lot of the conference, I'm sure, focused on e-mobility and light duty vehicles and transit and transport. But what you are here to hear today, we are all truck people. So Volvo Group is not here to talk about Volvo cars. That's a different company now. The Volvo Group is strictly medium and heavy duty and construction equipment. That, the Volkswagen Mitigation Fund that Mark referred to had some light duty aspects to it, but a lot of focus again on that medium and heavy duty truck and bus sector. Same goes for Natalia's work, and almost entirely, exclusively, all of my work has really got to do with trucks and off-road equipment in ports and rail yards. So when we think about that, you may have heard on other panels today that about a third of the GHG emissions for the nation come from transportation. And an easy way to think about that is you take that third and you divide it in half, and half of it is all of our light duty cars, things that we use to get around personally. But the other half of those emissions come entirely from this medium and heavy duty sector. And those are just GHGs. When we start to talk about things like diesel particulate matter, when we talk about NOx, when we talk about the types of emissions that are really affecting people's health, the communities that live near these freight facilities, things that, aggravate asthma and COPD, the types of emissions that, send kids rushing to the ER. Oh, hi, Miss Margaret. I'm so glad you were able to join us.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So those types of emissions come actually more from our medium and heavy duty sector. Hey, Margaret, we were just finishing.
My name is Miss Margaret.
Great. Thank you. We were just finishing up our introduction. So please introduce yourself and your organization.
Okay. My name is Miss Margaret Gordon. I am the co-director and one of the founders of the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. We are a 20-year plus environmental justice that deal with air, water, and soil issues and advocacy through research and data just in West Oakland. And we share our information and methodologies of doing the work that we do with other agencies, organizations, neighborhoods, planning processes, initiatives, and so forth and so on.
Great. Thanks so much. I'm glad we were able to get through our tech issues and get you on here. So,
all right, thank you.
We're just going to get started with some questions here. And I think I'll probably start with Arvin first. We were, talking about the fact that medium and heavy duty vehicles really are the, about half of the contribution of GHG transportation emissions and a even greater percentage of the sort of worst types of air pollutants that cause health issues. So working on policy at Volvo, what are you guys thinking as far as strategy? How do you guys plan to enter this market and make an impact?
Thanks again for that question, Nikki. The good news is Volvo Group is already moving very fast in this direction, and working with the rest of the industry and public authorities and also the communities. We're serious about this. We believe that zero emissions is the future. We have made a number of pledges, but the most important one is really by 2050, we want to be a carbon neutral company. And so by 2040, assuming a 10-year life cycle for our products, such as trucks, we want to start selling only zero emission trucks. Think of medium duty and heavy duty trucks. So that's the good news. And this is happening everywhere we play, and specifically in North America, where I live and operate. I'm proud to say that we're doing a lot with the industry, working with the industry. We have been successful in leveraging trust and support from some very important public authorities In California, for example, we were fortunate to work with the Air District in the South Coast and the California Air Resources Board to win a $100 million project that will deploy 30 Class 8 battery electric trucks. And this is just the start. The project will end next year, but the project has been running for about 2.5 years. It lives in the Inland Empire, if you're familiar with this area in California. But I'll leave you with this. This project has been the launching pad for our commercial solutions. And also, if everything goes well, the next couple years, we're going to have hundreds of Class 8 battery electric trucks in different parts of the US. So we're excited, and we want to continue working with the industry and other stakeholders.
Great, thanks. So our other manufacturer representative here is Natalia with Roush. Tell us a little bit about how your company is approaching this transition.
Absolutely. So I think traditionally Roush Clean Tech has been known primarily for our work in the propane industry, which does have, acute air quality benefits, reducing PM 2.5, reducing, ozone criteria pollutants and things like that. But electrification is a really new, exciting phase for our company. And we have, big plans. We have a Class 6 battery electric truck that we're currently selling that'll be hitting the road in mid 2023. But we have some pilot programs happening right now. And it's really exciting to see how these vehicles have been used. So we're seeing, piloting them within some municipalities that are using them in their sanitation departments different work that they're doing around town. And then we also have our partners at Penske who are deploying the trucks, and they're really servicing these hub and spoke type of routes, right? The vehicle has a 100-mile range. So it's really perfect for going into, an industrial area, picking up a load for deliveries, and then making frequent stops throughout the day, because a lot of frontline and marginalized communities are co-located really, in industrial areas or on these, majorly trafficked highways. And so we're really excited to see how our battery electric vehicles can be a big part of the solution.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It's always been that the neighborhoods near distribution facilities were overburdened by truck traffic and pollution. But I think that a lot of our movement to e-commerce has only exacerbated that, with more and more trucks and more warehouse space being built out. So if we're going to continue to sort of consume goods in this way, we have to make sure that we're not doing it at the expense of our most vulnerable communities. I think with that, I'd like to move over to Mark and Miss Margaret, who both work on sort of providing technical assistance in the communities for this type of work. There you are, Miss Margaret. Great. So I'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what's been happening in West Oakland and your work with the port there?
Well, I have, let's be clear. With West Oakland, we have a port, three freeways, and a Bay Bridge crossing, and then including all the other ancillary and transportation sites for services and buildings. So we have warehouses, we have storage facilities, we have the freeways, we have the port itself, and the Bay Bridge, all in one neighborhood. So we are fighting a multi-pronged process of emission reduction. So we had to establish ourselves as West Oakland Environmental Indicators, where we best utilize and identify zero emissions anything. First of all, we got to have the infrastructure. We're still having fights about who is going to bring the infrastructure for the charger stations. Then I decide what is the equity? Are we just going to have all the charging infrastructure for the port and not for the community on the other side of the freeway? So we got to also look at equity here, because we know as West Oakland residents, things happen for infrastructurally wise in the port area that don't happen into the community. All right. Then secondly, we got to talking about how are we doing the metrics and following emission reduction planning alongside of trying to get the infrastructure together. Then the third thing is, how do we get money to the Port of Oakland just to invest and get incentives to do the process? And right now, none of those things, all those things are interconnected. You just can't separate one out from the other. Yes, the port is bringing in 30 zero emitting trucks as a pilot to do what? And simultaneously, they are expanding. There are 3 new warehouses out in that area. So we still have to have the advocacy to have a place, a space to sit down, to have these discussions and dialogues, community engagement, and support not only what's happening in the community, but also the truck drivers. Nobody's talking about how the truck drivers, because we have independent truck driver systems in California. So who is helping supporting those who want to make that living driving these trucks get funding for them? Where is the institutions to support them and doing? So it's a multiple pronged process that we are looking at and identifying who needs what most support to get to zero emissions. Because if you don't pull it together, and coordination and collaboration is a whole bunch of confusion. So we have almost like 3 different committees or working groups or committees who are sitting down regularly trying to achieve those things I'm talking about.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Margaret. I can really relate to your comment about the the small trucking companies and independent owner operators, because I was a small trucking company owner before I came to CalSTART, and we ran about 6 trucks in and out of the port here in Long Beach and Los Angeles. And what I've noticed, within our incentive models is the need to increase our outreach, education, and technical assistance so that small businesses can take advantage of the funding that's available, because they don't necessarily have sustainability staff and policy professionals who are sitting around waiting to fill out grant applications. And so I know I certainly didn't when I was a small business. And right. So to that end, I would love to actually hear from Mark. I know you've been doing technical assistance.
One more point real quick. The equity issue for doing all this e-mobile zero emission has not been lifted up to the place. Whereas that those who always get pushed out are being pulled in. The first line of who get pushed out is either the residents in the local areas and those drivers. And nothing in this e-commerce, this e-mobilization is talking about equity, inclusion, and the disparities of bringing folks to the table. Unless we do it. Let's a community group like we do it.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing from the manufacturing. I hear someone from the agencies, but it ain't the same thing.
Yeah, and providing that support, because definitely in a big industry transformation that we're going to have right now, it's the companies that are the least capitalized and have the least access to information that are going to end up maybe being injured. So we want to make sure that we support them. Mark, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you've done for providing technical assistance for the Volkswagen Fund?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so it's interesting. It's almost in some ways it's kind of on the other end of the spectrum from what Ms. Margaret was just talking about, because since I work with tribal communities around the country, most of them are in pretty rural areas and not near big cities, not near a lot of industry, things like that. So kind of looking at the other end of the spectrum in that sense, maybe. But yeah, so as I mentioned a little bit in my intro, I've been working on this this Volkswagen Settlement Technical Assistance Program for the past 3 years through 4 funding cycles. We squeezed 2 funding cycles into the first year for reasons that don't need to be gone into. But and so we've worked with got 104, 105 or so tribes around the country so far in this program in the 4 funding cycles. I don't have data from this most recent funding cycle yet for all the types of projects that have been done because we're still working through that. But for the first 3 funding cycles, we helped tribes replace 155 total medium to heavy duty trucks. Unfortunately, most of those were diesel, new diesels. Like I said in the beginning, they could either buy new diesels or electric or hybrids or whatever. But 4 of those vehicles were electrics. And I don't know if buses count under our umbrella here, but I'm just going to mention them because they're still medium to heavy duty. We also help folks replace 35 total buses, of which 6 of those were electric. And then we also helped, one part of the program allows people to purchase EV charging stations for light duty vehicles. So again, not exactly under the umbrella of this topic, but just to throw it out there, people were able to purchase 53 EV charging stations over those first 3 funding cycles. So I think I do want to address a little bit the issue of, like I said, okay, for the trucks, 155 trucks were purchased. 4 of those were electric. I would love to have seen more electric vehicles or hybrids at least in that mix. And I think, and maybe Natalie or Arvin can help a little bit with this, but my feeling from working with this program for the last few years is that the market for electric trucks, in particular electric medium to heavy duty trucks, is still kind of emerging. I know there are a few things out there, but when I was working with tribes, a lot of times they would do some research and they basically weren't finding anything that either they weren't finding anything that was available, or if they did, it was outside of their budget. Because the way this program worked, it's not competitive. So any tribe who's federally recognized tribe who applies for funding through this program and jumps through all the hoops, which is what we help with, will get their money. And so there's a fixed pot of money each year. And so then there's allocations for each tribe that are determined based on how many tribes apply and what their populations are. So the average allocation for the last few years has been in the neighborhood of like $150,000 to $170,000 per tribe. And so that's often enough to purchase a new diesel vehicle. But from what I've seen, it seems like the electric trucks at this point that folks have purchased are still a fair bit above that range. So then the tribes had to do a smaller or greater cost share depending on to cover the extra, depending on what the costs were and everything. So I think that's one reason. I think, well, maybe 2 reasons, both availability and cost might be why we haven't seen a ton of uptake of electric vehicles with this program thus far. But then the other thing too is, like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm dealing mostly with rural communities. And so in some cases, they're traveling several hundred miles a day for their vehicles to get around the reservation or, to do deliveries or whatever they're doing. And so range may be a bit of an issue too with some of the electric trucks. I know Natalia was mentioning they have I think you were mentioning you have a truck that's got like 100-mile range, which is awesome if you're in an urban area, but a little bit more challenging sometimes if you're in a rural area and traveling large distances each day. So. But anyway, yeah, that's the kind of stuff I've been working on, is helping folks get access to these vehicles and then seeing what we can do with that. I do want to put in one little plug as well for the role of technical assistance in any types of programs where we want to see more uptake of EV charging stations, or electric vehicles, and particularly when we're dealing with marginalized communities, because a lot of times, like Nikki was mentioning too, even for companies, you might have a company that, most small companies aren't going to have a grant writer on staff or somebody who can like watch for these types of opportunities and know how to get through all those hoops to get funding if there's funding available out there. So I think anyone who's working on any sort of a program that's trying to help folks get into this market, I think it's a really good thing if you can set up some sort of technical assistance program or whatever, because we've just gotten tons and tons of thanks from the folks that we've worked with. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, just in general saying we really appreciate having technical assistance for this, because this isn't a world we usually play in, in that sense. And so anyway, I'll stop there, but I just wanted to throw that out as well.
Yeah, there's 2 parts for that. That gives me 2 different questions that I want to ask both Arvin and Natalia, but I got a chance to chat with Natalia a little bit about Roush's strategy around how to support small businesses like that. And so I'd like her to speak a little bit to what their sort of technical assistance offerings are.
Yeah. I have plenty to say on that. And then also something that Miss Margaret said really resonated with me. And it was just about driver training, which we consider part of our technical support. And the vehicle that we sell in the Class 6 market, it's actually, it doesn't require a CDL to drive it. And as we're looking at labor shortages, as we're looking to diversify, what our truck driving demographics look like, not needing that CDL removes a barrier, right? You don't need that commercial driver's license in order to do the work. We can, our trucking partners can, hire drivers rapidly without that added layer of bureaucracy. So I think that's a positive. A couple of things that I'll say about our technical assistance is that one of the ways that I spend most of my time at my job is actually helping our customers identify funding opportunities, quantify the emissions of the project that they're looking to fund, and then supporting them as they apply for those funds. And so that can be things like running the A-Fleet tool or the diesel emissions quantifier to really figure out what the cost benefit is going to look like, helping to retire the right vehicles, because for a lot of these programs, scrappage is required, right? Because it's a diesel emissions project, and so you need to show that vehicle is exiting service. So figuring out which of those vehicles are the right ones, so helping with that technical analysis to really understand what the needs of the fleet are, and then supporting our customers in actually obtaining the funds, which we have a good rate of success at, which feels really good. And then the other thing that I'll mention is that we have a nationwide both dealership and service network across the United States. So we've got hundreds of different partners out there that help maintain and service the vehicles. And we're not really a transactional business. It's not like we sell the truck and then, we move out of the relationship. We have field service technicians that we deploy. So we'll send a Roush employee out to a location to either fix the truck itself if there's a problem. But I think more importantly, and that's kind of the teach a person to fish or give them a fish. We don't give people the fish. We actually teach them how to fish, so that if there is an ongoing maintenance issue with the vehicle, things like that, we're providing the technical training to really create ladders of opportunity for people that are interested in entering or growing their base of knowledge in the alternative fuels world.
Great. And I think as we think about this transition overall, I think that, it's important that these employees and drivers that are going to interact with electric vehicles, maybe for the first time in their job, very often take that experience and that knowledge home with them or onto their next jobs. Because I will say that I drove my first electric car here that they had as a loaner in the parking lot at my office. And by the end of the year, I had purchased a small used EV for my family. So I think that we'll find that these experiences certainly translate both back and forth. When you feel comfortable with the technology, when you have folks helping you learn it and understand it, when you start to see how it can truly deliver, then we can see how I think our medium and heavy duty contribution to this conversation is going to move the entire market forward. Now, there was a question in the chat for Arvind. Folks are really interested in that 30 truck deployment that you mentioned. So if you have a link, folks really want to see that. But I think I'd like to also ask you to talk about some of the limitations that Mark addressed, right? That folks were finding like a shortage in the number of available vehicles, that the price was way too high, that the incentive that was available couldn't even cover it. So, how are you guys approaching this? What do you see the future of the market looking like?
Yeah. Thanks for that question, and thank you to the audience for your interest. I just put the link there. Hopefully that works. If one of you can click on that and give me a thumbs up, I'll know that it works. But we're still in the early days. We're totally in the early days, and this is a nascent market. And I'd like folks to just think about the first iPhone. Came out in 2007, and what was the price point? And 2008, the second generation came. What happened to the first generation price point? And fast forward, 4 more years, iPhone 4 was out, and what was the price point for your iPhone version 1 or version 2? And hopefully you're kind of following the train of thought here. It's early days. It's a new technology. And just for context, a truck is not just a scaled up light duty vehicle. Am I still audible? Because there's some background noise. So I hope I'm still audible. Okay. Am I still audible? Okay. You can. Yep. So basically, a Class 8 truck has 4 to 6 battery packs. That is, you're looking at about 4 to 6 times the onboard energy. That's where the cost is. Furthermore, these are not batteries that you can swap. You can just haul. I mean, each battery pack weighs about 1,200 pounds. And I want to build this framework because it's not a trivial task. And when we build a truck, we make sure that the battery is enclosed so that, God forbid, crazy things happen inside the battery, maybe it catches fire, whatever. It's not going to burn down the truck. So that all adds weight, complexity to the integration. We want to do it in a safe manner. That all adds cost. Then you also have very expensive chargers that are needed. You have more energy on board, so you obviously need more powerful chargers, and those are expensive. So I guess I really want folks to understand that this is a nascent market. It's more powerful. It's going to cost a little bit more in the near term. So obviously, we're not able to get truck orders for hundreds and thousands of trucks today. It also takes some time to build these trucks. I mean, we're talking about 4 to 6 months, but we all know there's a global supply chain issue. So we're kind of keeping our fingers crossed, and we're closely monitoring how that's going to impact us. Again, this is the backdrop. I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer here. We're definitely making progress. You heard from Natalia. The industry is moving forward. The challenges are going to be near term and midterm. And I think in the longer term, the market's going to drive this, the prices down. In the near term, what we are asking, especially working with the public authorities, at the state levels and federal levels, offer some incentives. We need incentives for vehicles. We need incentives for charging infrastructure. Unlike a light duty vehicle, where if you buy a plug-in hybrid, you get a charger that you can kind of plug to your in your garage or whatever. It's not going to work this time because the charger for a truck will be about 10x more powerful. It'll probably cost maybe 5 or 6 times more. What that means is you're probably going to need a new switchgear panel, some extensive electrical civil work. So I think given that this is new, given that there's some handholding required, our ask has been to also from the government authorities to give the right kind of incentives, maybe more targeted incentives. You heard Ms. Gordon talk about the port communities. Nikki, I mean, independent owner operators, $100,000 cash on the hood is not going to cut it for something that is more than $300,000. So maybe look at these applications that are ripe for the introduction of electric vehicles. And let's start thinking about targeted incentives that'll really, really help these guys transition. And of course, as Natalia pointed out, the industry, the OEMs and the technology providers have to step in and really work with these people. And that's exactly what we're doing. So I know I spoke a little bit more, but hopefully this was, this is appreciated because I think it's important to know it's a new industry that is just starting to turn, and it's going to take a whole village to get this done right. And it's going to be 5 to 7, maybe 10 years before things take off. But we can get there faster and make it more sustainable if we all work together and do this the right way.
Great, thanks. And I think that starts to address a question that we've had more than once in the chat, which is folks asking, what's the big holdup? Like, what is holding back deployments at scale? Like, what are the real challenges that need to be overcome? So, Miss Margaret, I think Arvin gave us a good perspective on, from the OEM side, the folks that are building these trucks, the manufacturers. But since you've been advocating so long and so fiercely in California to get these trucks on the road, what is your view about what some of the biggest barriers and challenges have been? What do you feel like is standing in the way of getting clean trucks on in your neighborhood now?
Oh, well, it's always about money and how capitalists and capital flow to and from the who. And the who right now is the challenging factor is how we support the owner operators. And that how is once the owner operator, we don't put them in a lurch of having debt to be able to own one of these new trucks. Then also there's another end, a beginning understanding is the chemicals or the materials that are needed to build these batteries, how are we protecting those communities as well as part of the lack of the conversation around equity and on the worldwide stage. So there's a lot of gaps here. And just looking at the end result of around zero emissions, reducing the pollution level, but we're not really coordinating ourselves in such a way that there's more including from the end result as part of the beginning result as part of the change supply as it comes back into our communities, looking at as part of the emission reduction plans. So like I said, I have a port sustainability meeting that West Oakland Environmental Indicators have organized ourselves separate from the port, and we invite the port to sit at this table with us. Then we have the port have a stakeholder group that we are invited to go to their meetings because of their plans of action for the next 20, 30 years around zero emissions. Then we have our AB 617 committee is looking at ports with 89 strategies. So we have all these different things that we're trying to coordinate. We are in some coordination because some of us are sitting in those 3 sets of tables talking about the same thing. But who is not there is talking about, who is not talking about is how those who have the money, who has the investment, the financing, to make sure the equity issues are very being covered also. That's from the beginning of digging in the ground for the things that make the batteries to the end result to how old operators are being treated. And also who's in between there somewhere is what's going to happen to these mechanics? What's going to happen to the mechanics? Who is retooling them? Who is re-educating them? Who is giving them new orientation about fixing, repairing these trucks? So it's a big gap of things that have not been really transparent and accountable yet in this new economy of building this momentum around zero emissions vehicles and trucks.
I think you made such a good point talking about coordination. You know, that's something that I hear a lot when I'm reaching out to small fleets. They're just like, there's too many webinars, there's too many public meetings, there's too many, like, I go to all these AB 617 meetings at night too, right? I try to attend the car board hearings, but it is a lot of meetings when you're just trying to do your job, you know, as a trucking company, which is to move goods, right? Everybody wants to get their stuff. And I think that you're right in that it's not getting addressed really as an equity issue, because asking folks to attend all of those meetings is asking for free labor, right? They're asking community members and they're asking these small businesses to show up and contribute their expertise, their professional insights, you know, all of the information they have from boots on the ground. And they're asking folks to do that for free, which is very extractive. I mean, in the Black community, we have like a word for that, free labor. So I think that folks should really consider that when they're trying to create their programs and they're trying to do outreach for trucks and incentives. Like, think about how much you're asking for in free labor and how much you're really giving in support in return. Now, Arvind, I saw your hand go up. I think you wanted to say something about batteries, but I'll let you.
Yeah. Well, you've read my mind, but actually, I wanted to also take a moment to address and maybe add on to Miss Gordon's comments. I mean, absolutely. I mean, again, it goes back to targeted incentives. You know, I'm just going to pick on the HVIP program where you have $120,000 cash on the hood. Well, that may work for Amazon, Walmart, larger, maybe mid-sized fleet operators, but for, you know, the independent owner operators, that's not going to cut it. So again, talking to the fleets, people who are designing these incentives, once they go out and talk to the fleets and understand the economics, the operations, and because folks are willing to do the right thing. I don't think there's any bad people out there. I mean, people want to do the right thing. But if I'm used to doing my job and by, with a $40,000 truck or a $50,000 truck, how am I going to afford a truck that is 7-8 times more? And I think that's sort of the gap that we as an industry, broader industry, need to really work hard to bridge. And that starts with the incentive makers, the public authorities, going and talking to the fleets, boots on the ground. That's the first thing. Second thing is the workforce development. Absolutely. And Volvo Lights is actually, it's scratching the surface, the link that I just put. We absolutely recognize that there's going to be a disruption, which is why I keep saying this is a nascent industry. This paradigm shift is just starting. The train is just about to leave the station, but it's a long station. So there's plenty of time to get on the train, So absolutely. And this requires training existing. It's not really taking out employees or reducing jobs. It's creating more jobs in a cleaner environment, hopefully higher paying jobs, which eventually will translate to higher quality of life. This is not going to happen overnight. It's not like the Matrix movie where, you put a chip and the person just becomes highly skilled technician. I mean, it's going to take some time. And I think industry is looking at that, but I absolutely agree that more effort is needed here. And which again, is something that I have brought to the policymakers, helping them understand that it's not just people who work on the trucks, it's people who work on the chargers. There's workforce development that is needed across this entire ecosystem. And the third thing, which I really originally wanted to raise, batteries. Great point again, Ms. Gordon. I can speak to what Volvo Group is doing. I mean, we definitely don't want to have our batteries end up in landfills and pretty much change the problem to a different problem. Absolutely. So one of the things that we are doing, and I think we need more of this in California and maybe even in the US, is regulations to make sure that there are these programs in place. I know there's one regulation in Europe where a battery or light duty vehicles that come into certain cities within the EU, the critical minerals, after 8 to 10 years of first life, if they're not being used in the second life application, and let's say they're being recycled, the minerals stay within the EU. And I think we got to start putting more emphasis on how we can make this circular economy, like we call it. And also Volvo Group is actively looking at second life battery and third life batteries. And there's many steps where you can extend the first life by just changing out a few cells. So absolutely, to your point, I mean, I spoke about Volvo Group, but I can tell you the industry does not want to create landfills with this battery pack. So thank you for raising these very, very good points.
Thanks. So there's a question in the Q&A from Mark, but I saw Natalia lean forward, so I'm trying to read your virtual body language. Did you have something you wanted to chime in while we were on topic here?
No, we can go ahead and take a question. I don't have anything specific that I wanted to add.
Okay, great. So the question for Mark was, are the infrastructure costs more expensive in rural areas compared to urban areas? Sounded like you put out about 150 chargers. Were there some specific challenges there?
Yeah, I think there were, for sure. It's it's hard to do an exact like apples to apples comparison or anything because I wasn't the one going out and getting quotes and all that. I was just reviewing documents given to me by the tribes that I was working with. And so I saw what they had done looking at things. But I think costs are probably almost certainly higher in rural areas for a couple of reasons. Well, really just the main reason is, a couple of reasons, I guess. Obviously things have to be transported farther, things like that. They're just getting from point A to point B to do the work or bring the material there and things like that obviously can cost more. But also one of the things I definitely noticed working with a lot of tribes is, there are some tribes that are located in urban areas or immediately adjacent to urban areas. There's a number of tribes in the Phoenix, Arizona area. There's a number in Southern California as well that we worked with. And in those cases, they just had a lot more options. So they were able to actually shop around rather than just having, say, one dealer that they could get a truck from or get EV charging equipment from or something. If they were in or near an urban area, they might have 4, 5, 6, 7 different options or something to choose from. And so I think that by its very nature kind of ended up resulting in lower costs for them as well because they had more choice and there was more competition and things. So yeah, it does seem like the costs are to some degree higher in rural areas. I don't think it's a huge amount, but again, it's hard for me to say for sure because I wasn't able to go out on my own and do these very specific comparisons or anything. So
Great. Now, while we're with you, I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about DERA funding and how folks can use that. And I think Natalia has something to add there. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about the national incentives that are available.
Sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned in my intro, the Volkswagen program is winding down now. We're in our fourth funding cycle. It's probably going to be the last funding cycle. But even if there is one more funding cycle, that only will only be open to tribes who have already gotten into the program. So there's basically no options for new folks to get into that program anymore. But yeah, there is this DERA program, and that stands for Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, which was a congressional act from back in, I'm not sure, I think it was in the late 90s, mid to late 90s maybe. And there is it's a series of programs, really. It's not just one program. It's a series of programs to help reduce diesel emissions around the country by, similar to the Volkswagen program, which was modeled on DERA basically, by removing old vehicles out of service and replacing them with new vehicles, or retrofitting them to change, to add emissions reduction technologies and things like that. And one of the options for new vehicles, of course, now in particular, is to get electric vehicles if folks want to head in that direction. And so the DERA program, again, or the DERA programs, there's two broad separate sets of programs. There's the nationwide competition, which is mostly geared towards states, although tribes and other entities, municipalities and things, I think, too, can also apply. But it's a competitive program run through EPA, I guess, if I didn't mention it at the beginning. And so for the nationwide program, if anybody's going to compete in that venue or whatever, they're competing against the states. And so that can be tough for smaller entities and for tribes, and just groups that don't have as big of resources as the states do. So a few years back, maybe 6, 7, 10 years ago, something like that, EPA set up a separate pot of money under DERA for the tribe. So there's a separate tribal DERA program now. And that's been running for a number of years now. Like I said, it's an annual thing. It's competitive. They generally give out in the neighborhood, or at least in the past, they've given out in the neighborhood of about $2 million a year. So it's not a huge pot of money given the number of people and communities they're trying to serve. But it's something. And there had been, up until this year, there had been a mandatory cost share where every tribe, and again, I'm speaking mostly about the tribal program because that's what I work with, but every tribe who applied for this had to do a cost share of somewhere between 40 to 60% or something. I don't remember the exact numbers, depending on what exact type of vehicle they were getting and things like that. That was found to be a very limiting issue because, again, a lot of these communities don't have a ton of resources. They might not be able to make that mandatory cost share. And so this year, for the first time, 2021, the EPA was able to get rid of that cost share, which is awesome, really greatly expands the accessibility of the program to folks. And they were able to pump a bit more money into it too, because of course, as you might imagine, once they removed that cost share, the program suddenly got a lot more compelling to people. And so it was a lot more competitive. There were a lot more folks who applied. So if I remember right, I think they had maybe 4.5 million or something this year. We don't know what they'll do next year. It's a congressional appropriation thing. So it kind of, it's dependent on budgets and stuff like that. But hopefully they'll be able to continue with a bit more funding now that they got rid of that mandatory match. So that's that program. And then just briefly to touch on the state side, each state typically applies for, most states, I guess, apply for this money as well and get some money. And then they generally run kind of re-granting programs where they re-grant that money out to folks in their states. And so that can be tribal communities, that can be municipalities, counties, all sorts of things, as I understand it, can apply for funding from that as well to replace vehicles or retrofit vehicles and potentially to purchase new EVs as well. So.
Yeah, and I think it's good to remind everybody that if you're looking at using some of these DARE programs, when you put in your application, you want to have your technology partner with you, right? You want to have your vehicle selected. You want to know what you're replacing with what. And I think that's where the support coming from an organization like Roush can really help. So Natalia, tell us a little bit about what you guys do with DARE.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are actively tracking DARA opportunities that are set to open through the federal government in December. And so I think everything that Mark said tracks with what our expectations and experience are showing. You know, under the Biden administration, you had this Justice 40 initiative that's really designed to make sure at least 40% of all funds are really spent in frontline communities that are disproportionately burdened here. And so that is, for me, one of the objectives that I had for being on this panel today is to build some of these partnerships with community groups that have their fingers on the pulse of what's happening in these communities, what the needs really are. Because sure, I can go on and look at the EPA's EJ screener tool. I can look at the different zip codes. I can figure out where vehicles are domiciled, but that's really hands off. And it's really, in my opinion, inauthentic. And I think that those, understanding the unique needs of each community and what their priorities are and how electric trucks can be a part of the solution, I think is something that we as an industry really need to get a better handle on, because there's certain communities where they're really focusing more on water quality, right? Like there's like a Flint or something like that, right? Where, we don't want to force a solution on a group of people that maybe it's not high priority for them. And so I think that for me, like I said, having the opportunity to reach out to people that might want to work with Roush to be a partner on this, because I think it's important now to start building those relationships. We don't, I use the word authentic because I don't want to only be working with people because there's money to be had. I'd rather build a partnership and then be able to go out and find like the right opportunity to fit the need of the people that it's going to be impacting directly.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I don't think any community nonprofit appreciates when people start knocking on their door just to partner on a grant, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% right. And I'm really sensitive to that. And that's one of the objectives that I have. So I encourage people to reach out if they're interested in building a partnership.
There were a couple more questions for Roush specifically. The one that I have has to do with a sort of infrastructure question earlier, which is when you guys partner on a project like this, how hands-on are you with helping a small business maybe figure out what kind of charging they need and how to get it in the ground?
I like to think that we're really hands-on, although we do, we rely on our infrastructure partners to bring their knowledge and expertise. And so we kind of maintain a short list of infrastructure providers that we work with. I'll use Green Lots as one example of many, right? But having an existing relationship that we can tap into to help facilitate those connections, but the infrastructure provider and the local utility, those are really key. And we stay engaged and answer questions and things like that. But we also want to make sure that the people with the higher level of expertise that are sleeping and breathing this every day are the ones that have the opportunity to help design that phase of the project. And we want to make sure it's all compatible. But we don't expect a small fleet owner operator to have a Rolodex, to use like a really outdated term, of or 100 LinkedIn profile connections, on this topic. And so we're really happy to help, find them the right solution. And that's why we're not really exclusive with any one network, because we think that it breeds more opportunity to kind of be agnostic.
Great. There was another question following on to Aravind, which was what battery chemistry is Roush using?
So for Roush, we are using Proterra battery pack. So it's a lithium ion NMC. It's actually a modular design. So we have two different battery packs, and it's a 165 kilowatt hour pack that we use. And so we're Proterra powered.
Okay.
Great. And then Aravind, I'll let you answer that for Volvo, if you like.
Yeah, we use a lithium ion battery pack also. I think I'll let folks figure out. I mean, I think the information is kind of out there, but we're not being very explicit about the battery manufacturer. But rest assured, it's the way Volvo Group works is we make sure that it's vetted completely and critical minerals are not sourced from places where they should not be sourced. I'll give you one hint. It is somewhere in the Midwest, so you go figure it out. But anyway, so I think not done anything that I shouldn't be doing. But I think it's lithium ion battery pack, and it's I want to say about 350 kilowatt hours. Again, 4 battery packs, and then you can slap on 2 more battery packs. Each battery pack is about 64 kilowatt hours. So a lot of energy, a lot of onboard energy. So we definitely want to make sure that there's active cooling, active heating. So I'm saying this because we just don't want folks to use the battery for 5 years and toss it away. We're kind of anticipating 8 to 10 years, and with a little bit of software tweaks and helping people use these trucks better, maybe lengthen the life by another year or a year and a half or so. And again, we're thinking about second life, and there's an entire business unit we set up within the last year to handle battery second life and battery recycling and those types of activities.
Great. So I have one last, well, I really should let everybody just have their last say. So Ms. Margaret, I have a question for you, but if it's not the right question, feel free to say whatever you would like in your closing remarks. My question.
Be careful what you ask for.
Well, my question is this, because I work on these incentives, and like for a long time, I think our theory of change was let's get new technology in with big fleets and big companies because they can absorb the hit. Like if it doesn't work, it's not going to put them out of business. They have staff and enough vehicles to kind of like figure it out. But my thinking has evolved too, because I want to make sure that, the smaller fleets, the smaller businesses don't get passed over. They don't get a chance to access it. So I don't know, what is your thinking sort of been in like how to balance those two things, like not wanting to disadvantage small fleets by giving them new stuff, but also not wanting to leave them behind?
Well, my thing is, from doing all this work for as many years as I have done it, to be bringing people to the table, and how do we address connecting the dots, closing the gaps on all those conversations. And if we don't have that ability, that's all just add on to the problem. So somebody has to be able to set the table, to have the conversation, and also ask the right questions of how to move towards being more comprehensive, how to be more having the equity issues taken care of, how do we coordinate, how we do the coordination and collaboration, how are we problem solving, how are we trying to really look at looking at solutions that cover all those things, so we don't have disparities and inequality. So that's my method. You have to bring people to the table. You have to set the table in such a way that is a balance of power. All right, because you got money, I got people. That's my balance. All right, I got experience and expertise. That's also part of my power. You may have the financing and the investment. Okay, so we're gonna have to balance this power and how to set the agenda in such a way at the end of whatever we proposing here, that we have some commonalities and some agreements and being able to partner to go to the next level. I think that's one of the tools that need to be put in the toolkit while we're doing this, and and that process is not being made possible in all these different communities. And I'm a true believer, and I stay in my lane. That's why I work in West Oakland. I stay in my lane, and I know what to do in West Oakland. Now, if you want to know how I did what we did and our projects, our successes, I ain't got no problem about introducing it to you, giving you some education, some orientation about it. But at the same time, I'm not trying to be everywhere with everyone. When I come to a table, I'm doing just what I'm doing right now, explaining what has been my experience and my expertise. And I know that's kind of long-winded into the answer that the question that you asked me, but that's how we have done work. You got to have to set the table. If people don't want to set the table, go about your business. Because all you're doing is bringing in more problems.
Thanks.
And I'm not problem solving.
I think that's probably a good way to close us out. I was going to try to fit in around for everybody, but it's 10:51 and it's time for networking. So I see Natalia dropped her email in the chat. Anybody else that wants to drop their contact information, and our profiles are available in the conference sort of back end information. I think, Margaret, you closed this out on a good note, and feel
My
free
name
to.
is Miss Margaret. I'm
Thank you,
75 years old. Too old for you to let you call me by my first name. My kids don't even call. My kids and my grandkids and my great kids do not call me by my first name. It's
That's
Mama,
right,
Grandma, or Gigi, all right?
That's right. So we have ways to contact everybody. Thank you to all of my esteemed panelists today. It's been a pleasure to have you, and I hope that we can catch up with everybody that's joined us in our networking sessions right after this. So thanks so much.
All right.
You.
Y'all have a good day.
You too.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye, all.